All right, here we are, Mr. Jim Willis. Thank you so much once again for joining us. I believe this is our fourth conversation together, and
Yes,
yeah, I'm really happy to
always
have you.
fun, Rafa. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. Appreciate it.
So we were talking a little bit before about these strange times we are still
Ah,
going through.
yes,
It's
yes.
been there's been some change in the world. Tensions have become a little bit less tense in a way. People are um, accepting the face mask solution for now. I think it helps with the fear, and
Mhm.
so yeah, it's great that we don't have to stay so far away from people. I don't know if it's the same way here as it is where you are.
Well, I was going to ask you that same
Mm.
question. My wife and I are in a crazy situation out here. We live out in the woods. We've been pretty isolated now for 11 years. And so, in a lot of ways, what's happening out there it hasn't really affected us that much in terms of our day-to-day life. And yet, we can't always stay out in the woods. You've got to come out occasionally, or you've got to let other people in. For instance, I talk to people such as yourself, or I go to the store once a week or something like that. And what I've found is most difficult, and I don't know quite how to handle it. Um, Many times in the past, people have gone out into the woods or up on mountaintops or out into the desert or in places for that they can be away from the world. And this seclusion is helpful in some ways, but it's just a crutch, as the Buddhists remind us over and over again. If you can't find enlightenment where you are, you really can't find enlightenment. After after you reach enlightenment, you still have to wash the dishes and take out the trash. And so out here in the woods, we came out here for that specific purpose, to get away and to have time to meditate and to slow down our lives. But the problem is that now that we've done that, um, the outside world still comes in every time I turn on the television, every time I hear the news, every time I talk to people who have been hit by these difficult times we're in. And it makes it really hard, because I am conscious myself. I know in a in a very real way that here, at least in my country, in the United States, I've never experienced such division and such divisiveness and the kind of name calling and bullying and threatening and things that are going on. Uh, and I don't know if that's the actual state of things out there in the United States, around my country, or if that's just the way the news is reporting it, because let's face it, the news reports usually bad news because that's what people turn into. So even when you turn the stuff off, as we try to do, and try to meditate and try to focus, I'm finding it more and more difficult, because even though I'm not hearing it on a 24-hour basis, I know what's going on. And I hear some people, when I talk to folks like you or do radio shows, especially when people call in or something like that, I know that a lot of people are being affected by this. And a lot of people, quite a few people, tell me they see a great resurgence, that people facing the pandemic have had to go inward and find that inner resource that they're after. I've heard a lot of people say that. And yet, what I'm seeing on the news is exactly the opposite. People just going absolutely crazy. And when you're in that kind of a torn situation, it's very difficult. And then you enter the second stage of this, because not only can you not, can I at least not meditate as easily, and it takes me a lot longer to even begin to come to some kind of one point focus. Not only does that happen, then I start to blame myself. I start to feel guilty, like, what am I doing wrong? That kind of thing. So when you put it all together, it's difficult to maintain a really deep spiritual life in the midst of difficult times. And there are so many aspects that enter into it, including self-guilt and everything else. You wonder why, what's wrong and all with me and all this kind of thing. Why can't I do it? And yet it's part of the process, isn't it? I mean, it's one of the reasons we came here. Uh, in a way, I suppose what we need to come to an acceptance of is that here we are in this situation. Now, what are we going to make positive out of it? It's a negative, horrible thing, but how can we turn it into a positive? How can we use it to become more spiritually aware? How can we use it for spiritual growth? And that's the difficulty, because I talk to some people. I've had students in my classes and that kind of thing. We all share the same kind of a thing, that when you if you can't find uh, spirituality, if you can't find enlightenment where you are, obviously, yeah, you're not ever going to really find it. And yet, um, when you get into that mode, it's so very difficult. So it's a tough time. It's a tough time. In your where you are, in your surroundings, are people adjusting pretty well? Are people responding well?
Well, you have, or first of all, I think it's, I loved the what you said. It's like the modern version of the before enlightenment, chop wood and carry
Oh,
water.
yes, yes, yes. The old
Wash the
Zen
dishes,
story. Right,
wash
right.
the
Yeah,
dishes, and take out the trash. I love that.
yeah, yeah.
And
Uh,
yeah, tell me.
are the people that you're talking to, are they able to respond in this way and able to make progress during these times?
Well, there's so much going on, right? And
Mm-hmm.
mm, I find personally, first of all, similar to what you're saying, trying to meditate or trying to keep this the regular habit of meditation has been a little bit. I mean, it's had different moments, different
Mm-hmm.
times
Yeah,
when
yeah, yeah.
and I find it interesting what you're saying, that how perhaps the mental noise
Mm-hmm.
of the collective um, can have an effect on some of us who are
Mm-hmm.
more sensitive perhaps
Yeah.
to it, um, and in a way that is a kind of a thermometer of how the consciousness is doing,
Mm-hmm.
because we that are more sensible can feel in precisely that,
Yeah. Yeah.
how the collective is doing. And so in a way we could say that in general I think people are still um, it's hard to say. I don't want to generalize in this way,
Yes. Yeah.
like
That's right.
people
That's right.
are,
Mm-hmm.
because first and foremost I think we are there has been a shift, that is for sure, in consciousness. There
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
been an like there is, perhaps talking in numbers, there is a larger number of people that are awakening, that
Mm-hmm.
are beginning to take on practices such as meditation,
Mm-hmm.
uh, so much more than before. I think like 5 years back or 7 or 8 years back in 2012, it wasn't this common, and you would be perhaps not ridiculed. Well, ridiculed.
Mm-hmm.
That's the word. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps not that you would be ridiculed, but talking about energies and talking
Mm-hmm.
about
Yep. Yep.
astrology and meditation and all that stuff wasn't that uh, normal, as it is today. So,
This is where I'm really kind of out of it back here. I talk to people like yourself, and I hear this, but it's very difficult when you don't know it's coming. So in this way, social media is so good in some ways, because it allows people who have lots of miles between them, such as we do, it allows them to communicate and to know that there is a community out there, and that perhaps it's growing. On the other hand, like every other human invention, it can be used for good or it can be used for evil. And social media is also pushing around a lot of the bad ideas and a lot of the downright evil that's out there. It's it's quite a life when there's a great song, a gospel song, a Christian gospel song written by Bill and Gloria Gaither that said, they've been on the mountain, and one line of the song says, "Can't stay on the mountain, the work is down below, but I've seen the face of God and received the power to go." I think it's a great thing to go up on the mountain, but the work is out there down in the valley where the people are. And if we can get enough people who are really thoroughly invested in this and can take this opportunity of being able to spend a lot of time, and it's work. It's difficult to spend a lot of time in real meditation when you just don't feel like it. Or there even comes a time when, let's face it, as humans, we hate to admit this, but I've talked to a number of people who actually have developed a habit of negativity in their lives. And when they turn on the news, they want to hear the negative because that's the habit they've developed. Isn't it strange that human beings can actually develop a state of mind where it says they're not really happy unless they're miserable?
Yeah.
And
I
yet
think
there is an
we
element
get,
of that.
yeah, we get a certain rush from,
Yeah,
I don't know,
yeah,
some hormones,
yeah,
that if we know the wrong or the danger or the evil that's out there, we feel safe in
yes,
a way
yes,
because, oh, I
yeah,
know everything is horrible, so I'm
yeah,
safe because I know it, and
right,
it
right.
gives us a certain sense of safety and
Hmm.
security
Hmm.
in a very uh, physiological and very very basic way, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
like the root
it's
chakra, and I think
yeah,
that here what's going on, from here I mean like, as opposed to where you're at,
yeah,
a bit
yeah,
more
yeah,
secluded here in
yeah,
civilization or whatever we
yeah,
would call it,
yeah,
in the
yeah,
urban place,
yeah,
in particular in Uruguay. But looking at social media and all that, I have a kind of sense that, as I was saying, there's more people who are becoming aware, and at
good,
the same
good.
time, the other side of that coin, the 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 loss of consciousness or the fear aspect of it, and the sort of the manipulation or mind control in a way, is in a way it's becoming stronger. So there, as people wake up, the people who haven't woken up are becoming more controlled, you
Yeah,
know, or
yeah,
the people who are trying to control are trying to make more efforts to keep the sleeping people
yeah,
asleep.
yeah. That's right. I
But
think you're
that
absolutely right.
sleeping part of society or of humanity or of consciousness, that sleeping part, in numbers it's
Uh-huh.
smaller, but
Yeah,
it's being more controlled, you know. So
yeah,
now they are using more elements to control them. So social media
yeah,
um, and TV and everything is becoming uh, more overwhelming. Every now and then, for example, in my case, I don't have and haven't watched TV in like 7 years,
uh-huh.
and my parents do have a television, and when I go to visit them, I get a small glimpse of what's going on, and that's
Yes.
very much enough for me. I get this sense of, oh, okay, here's where the collective, or where this part of the collective is at. So I
Yeah,
go, and
yeah,
they have TV, the TV on just as background noise or whatever, with whatever's on TV, and I get this sense that, in a way, what tends to happen many times is that, so since there is an awakening going on, this other side is using this awakening, um, as a tool
hmm,
to keep people asleep, you know.
hmm,
So like the fake, perhaps the fake side
yeah,
of
yeah,
the awakening, they're using it to distract people.
yeah,
So
yeah.
um,
It's
that, yeah.
yeah, it's a strange thing. I like to picture it when a star starts its death throes. It gets bigger and bigger and hotter and hotter and brighter until all of a sudden it implodes on itself and it becomes a black hole. And I wonder whether that can be happening in our culture around the world today, that there was a certain element of all these things that we thought were important, and we're realizing they're not important. And all of these divisions and all of this mindset that tends to want to build walls between people instead of bridges. We've been in that cycle for a long time. When the Europeans sent out, for instance, their soldiers, really, and to conquer the world, in the name of whatever they were looking at, the whole idea was to put down and to really be more destructive than constructive. They didn't come, the Spanish and the English and the French, they didn't come here, for instance, to my country to in order to build bridges between them and the people, the indigenous people who were always
No,
here.
and just think
No,
about it. In my country, they came and
yeah,
they exterminated all the Indians.
yeah,
There's nothing left.
exactly. And we've been on that track now for quite a few hundred years. I'm wondering whether that mindset just kept getting bigger and bigger, that imperial, power-hungry mindset. And I wonder if we're beginning to see it now. It was burning brighter and brighter. I wonder if we're beginning to see it now begin to implode upon itself. Um, Quite frankly, I think we're at a crossroads. I really believe the human race is at a crossroads right now. We can go one of two different directions. We can go the way of the spiritual. We can go the way of the intuitive. We can go the way of building bridges, or we can go the way of destruction. And frankly, some of the technology that we have is terribly destructive. And I'm not just talking about nuclear warfare. I'm talking about even things like Facebook and Twitter and the internet. It can be used for such good, but it can be terribly destructive as well. And I wonder, when I read some of these Facebook rants that people put out, and all this kind of thing intermingled with the good things that you would like to see, I'm just wondering whether, when we see those kinds of things, we are seeing a technology that we are not morally and ethically and spiritually yet ready to handle. And if that is the case, we could go the way many of these lost civilizations that I've written about so much have gone. There came a time when they reached too high and too far, and they weren't ready for it. They didn't have a moral and ethical and spiritual baseline upon which to build. And so they collapsed into the dust of history. Um, we're living in an important time. It's not going to happen all at once. I'm not even sure I'll see the results of it in my lifetime. But when I hear you talking, for instance, about the folks who are using this as a positive time and the folks who are using this as a destructive time, it's just another field of battle on which this decision is being made. It was a wonderful hymn, a poem that was written to really protest America going into the Mexican War. And it became a Christian hymn. Once to every man and nation comes the moment to decide in the strife between truth and falsehood for the good or evil side. And it's a wonderful poem. Perhaps we've reached one of those points in history where the decision has to be made. A generation has to decide which way they're going to go.
I think so. I think we've reached, in fact, we've already turned the corner, in my opinion.
Good.
And we've already, they sometimes talk about this, like there is this number of people needed to tilt the scales toward the
Critical
positive.
mass.
The
Critical mass. Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
I think we've already reached that, and it's slowly starting to show, because I think a great example is this situation of 2020, when we've gone through a big crisis and a big unknown, something that from one day to the other, and I think we've served this situation pretty elegantly in a way. And yeah, there's always going to be the opposition, or the flip side of the awakening. There seems that it will always, but even people who before would have never looked for for help in
Mm-hmm.
spirituality, in going within.
Mm-hmm.
They are looking for that. So the fact that some of the people that you would never imagine are starting to convert,
Yeah.
by their
Yeah.
own will, because
Mm-hmm.
the situation has become so strong.
Mm-hmm.
For others, like for myself, and for people that I know that started a spiritual journey before, or a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
one of the big things was a strong situation that was a break point in our
Yes.
lives,
Yes.
of very very big suffering,
Mm-hmm.
that helped us, or helped me, see myself from the outside in a way, and see my situation, and strive for growth and change and
Mm-hmm.
transformation. And I
Yeah.
think many people, um, this situation that we're going through was that trigger for
I
them
hope
to
so.
start
Yeah.
awakening, and
Mm-hmm.
it awoke
Yeah.
lots of people.
Yeah, it comes upon us so gradually we don't realize it. Um, my wife and I were watching television the other night. We just wanted to get away from the news and everything, so we put on oh, I don't know, I think it was NCIS or one of those shows that sometimes people binge watch during these times. And we were watching one of these shows, and it started, and there was a course at the beginning because it was all there was a murder, and a number of people were violently killed and murdered, and then the rest of the show was spent solving it. But as soon as we saw that the murder of 2 or 3 different people in a horrific way, we had to stop it right away, and we looked at each other and said, do you realize we have just seen in the last 5 minutes more murder and mayhem on television than we saw in the first 15 or 20 years of our lives on television. Back then, my heroes, the Lone Ranger, he never shot anybody, shot the gun out of their hand, or something like that. People just weren't killed and murdered and mayhem. And now, gradually over the years, it's become a staple, and we call it entertainment. How did we ever get to the point when murdering somebody and then putting the bad guy in jail, that's entertainment? And yet it's just accepted nowadays. People just see it and say, yeah, that's the way it is. Um, I think we have to look carefully at ourselves and see exactly what's going on. And sometimes it takes a shock to the system to realize how far down that road we've gone. So like what you said, the 2020 is going to go down as one of the worst years of history if we let it. But on the other hand, we have a choice to say it could go down as one of the best years if we use it all productively and say no more, no more. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm very encouraged to hear you say that you're aware of more and more people who are coming to that. You're making me feel better about a community of people out there that really do care.
Yeah, it was this there was this period in my life when I felt very alone, and like I was the black sheep of
Oh,
the country, or of the city, or whatever, where I
yeah,
felt so alone. And stuff like this, like podcasts, people talking about all of this,
yeah,
made me realize, whoa, I'm not alone. I'm
yeah,
not the only one thinking this type of things, and interested in these topics and this kind of research.
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
and that helped me a lot to feel a sense of belonging to a group. And
Mhm.
I think people should, of course, TV and all of the media, it's unluckily, it's become a tool for mind control,
Mhm.
more than not.
Yeah,
And and the only way is to unplug from that, and
yeah,
to like switch the ratios of of time spent with that versus time spent inwards or in nature. Like, you're so lucky to be
yeah,
surrounded by nature where you live.
yeah,
You
yeah.
probably just wake up, I don't know if you drink coffee or whatever, but I can imagine you waking up, making a cup of coffee and going out, and there's birds
You
and there's
know, do
mountains,
you know
trees.
that's exactly the problem. I used to do that all the time.
Mm.
I have a gazebo that overlooks our medicine wheel, and my wife and I used to go out every morning before sunrise. And I'd take a cup of coffee, she'd take a cup of tea or something, and we'd go out and we'd sit in that gazebo and watch the sunrise and watch the animals come out and listen to the birds begin the dawn chorus. And we did this every single morning. But now, since all this has started, you know what we find ourselves doing? We get up, we make a cup of coffee, and we turn on the TV and
Mm.
listen to the news. And it's just a horrible habit. And yet somehow I feel like, well, if I don't do it, I'm not being responsible. You know, I'm not finding out what's going on in there, where I'm kidding myself and all this kind of stuff. Once you start down the road of a bad habit, it's hard to come back from it. And I'm finding it very difficult. I've had friends who have had to whip some pretty bad things that they were addicted to,
Mm.
and seeing them go through some very difficult times. And unfortunately, I come to the point where I'm going to need to really sit myself down and say, Jim, you're addicted to this kind of thing, and you've got to bust that behavior. You've got to break that behavior. And it's not an easy thing to do. So if any of your listeners out there are wondering how to handle this, I wish I could give you great advice, but do what I say, don't do what I do. I'm not being very good at it myself, but I'm aware of the problem, and that's number one. You have to be able to say, I have this addiction before you can begin to comment, before you begin to go away from it. Probably with me, at least, it began, and also as you get older, I'm living in a body that is rapidly approaching its um, sell by date. You know, I mean, it's I'm having always been an athlete, having always been a musician, having always been uh, living through my body, so to speak. I'm finding it very difficult when you try to get up and move and it hurts, and you try to walk and your back hurts or your knees hurt or all this kind of thing. And when you're in that kind of a situation, it's really tough. It's so much easier to sit down on a couch, put your feet up, pour yourself a cup of coffee, turn on the television to be entertained by whatever it is. And it's a hard thing. Um, and looking back and realizing how slowly it's come upon me, but how completely it's come upon me. That's not an easy thing. It's very difficult to look yourself in the face in the mirror and say, come on, you got to do something about this. It's really important, but it has come to that.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all that you're sharing. I see how personal all of this
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Very personal.
Yeah, I appreciate the trust, that you
Well,
feel to share it.
I got a kick out of it when you contacted me and said, let's have a talk. Um, we've had 3 of these, I think, so far. Is this our 4th or 5th or
Yeah.
something like that? I don't know. And you asked me, what would you like to center on? And normally on a situation like this, the person being interviewed will say, well, I just wrote this book. Let's talk about it, marketing, public, and everything else. But this time, having talked to you in the past and seen where our directions have gone, I was able to say, Rafa, we're both musicians. Let's just jam. Let's get down and improvise. No chord chart, no
Mhm.
chords to have to follow. Let's just free improvisation and see what comes. So when we began this conversation, I had no idea we'd be talking in this way, but I think it's important because I think there's a lot of people who are probably thinking this way and can use, hopefully, some encouragement that we're not alone in this whole thing. We're in it together. We always have been in it together, and we just forget sometimes.
Yeah, and now that you share this, you know that there's going to be, of course, from me, but from everybody who listens, there's going to be lots of positive energy going your way
I hope so.
to
I hope
help
so.
you become more concentrated in meditation easier, and to help you modify that habit from something that you don't like to something that you know is good for you. I think you're going to
Thank
find
you.
yourself going out to nature in the morning more regularly.
I hope so. I hope so. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the encouragement.
Mm.
Uh, and again, too, it hasn't helped any that so many of the books that I've been writing about are about ancient civilizations that have, in one way or another, passed by.
Mm.
Sometimes because of climate change, sometimes because of warfare, sometimes because of disease, sometimes because their technology outstripped their ability to be able to control it. And when the civilization has passed, this has reached this kind of idea in the past, it has collapsed under its own weight. Now, it doesn't help any that we're facing all of those situations together. There is there is going to be an online um, conference coming up in November that I've been asked to participate in. There'll be eight of us speaking, either individually or sometimes in panel discussions. And the idea is about the wisdom of the ancients and in terms of healing, and how they were able to bring about healing in ways that were totally different than the typical idea today. If a person is sick today, either physically or mentally, the tendency nowadays is to throw drugs at it. Um, Even if a person is suffering depression or suffering something like that, take a pill, feel better. The ancients, of course, had different ways of dealing with this. That's what that conference is going to be about. And I'm hoping that that conference is going to come at a really important time, because uh, people, myself and others, we do need healing today in a lot of different ways, not only physical healing, but biological healing in terms of the whole planet, and psychological healing. And I think there are answers that are not going to be found in just taking a pill. I think the answers are going to be found in a deep spiritual meditation. So perhaps the year 2020 is going to be the time when we all get together to face that future that's out there. I'm not going to paint a rosy picture on it, but I do know that there are powerful forces at work in the cosmos that uh, can be drawn upon if we just prepare ourselves and do it with the right frame of mind, with the right intention. And I'm excited about that happening. I really am. To any extent that I can help in that kind of growth, well, I want to be part of it. I really do. So shows like yours are so important. I don't know whether my daughter is the one you usually contact, because she handles all of my scheduling and everything else. I don't know whether she told you. I think she did tell you. The last time we were together, or the time before that, you put it up, and it was on the internet. And friends of mine who I haven't seen for, I'll bet you 30 years at least. Friends of mine happened to see that particular broadcast on YouTube, and they got in touch with me. So you see, you down where you are brought up me where I am with my friends who are up in New England, and we all got together to renew a friendship. So there's wonderful positive things about all this kind of thing happening, and I thank you for it. I really do.
Yeah, I remember now that your daughter told me. It was such a beautiful news
Yeah,
for me to hear that the podcast,
yeah.
as small as it is right now, had such a beautiful impact in your life.
Oh, it did. It really did. It really did.
And when you were speaking before, about how you write these books about ancient civilizations that have passed, and also I don't want to forget, let's also go, if we can, into the energy healing perhaps, or the different
Certainly.
types of healing. But
Hmm.
I wanted to say something that came to me when you were speaking, is that even though, as you were saying, all these civilizations in one way or another eventually got destroyed or destroyed themselves,
Hmm.
or to put it in another way, they are past, they are no longer
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah.
I think there is this kind of new perspective that we can take to all of that, that we are the descendants of whoever did survive back then, right?
Ah, that's a wonderful view.
So
Yes.
perhaps we are not Egyptians or Sumerians or Mayans or I don't know, etc.
Hmm. Yeah.
Very like, but we are the 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 modern day version of the people who did survive. So in a way, there is a kind of a thread that
Mm,
continues in us from that day.
yeah.
So they had to of course uh, uh, intermingle with each other and create new genetic lines or whatever in order to survive. But even though the what we call the, for example, let's say the Egyptian civilization
Hmm. Yes,
has disappeared, uh, not every Egyptian was wiped out
that's right.
when that civilization disappeared, and
Yeah.
we are the descendants of whoever did continue forward. And in fact, when a civilization is wiped out, there's most likely hundreds or thousands of years, perhaps, of very, very intense suffering,
Hmm.
uh, which we are the inheritance of of the genetic line that
Uh,
survived that intense
and
cold,
yeah,
hunger, and fear, right?
des- descendants of the victors.
Mm.
I love that.
We are the
That's a
descendants of the strongest ones, in a
the
way.
strongest
They
ones. That's right.
survived
Yeah,
the apocalypse of of
yeah,
their
yeah, yeah,
civilizations, or
yeah.
the destruction.
Yeah, the whole idea of karma continuing through life after life after life, and building up. Uh, uh, I know a lot of people tend to think of karma in terms of all the past bad stuff you do comes back, but there's really a much more positive input on this in India. That the idea is upward, that the wheel of samsara is turning and it goes around and around and around, and every time you go through this long period of of karmic, um, well, karmic accomplishments, so to speak, you become stronger. You become, until eventually you have that wonderful experience, for instance, that Siddhartha had when he sat under the bo tree, and in that moment of enlightenment he saw all of his past lives that led to this particular moment.
Mm.
He understood the working of karma in this way that made him who he was. So, in a sense, I love to look at it that way. As you just said, we can all be sitting under our own boat tree, our own tree of enlightenment, and we can look at the karmic strength of all of those past civilizations that led to ours. There may be a whole new book here, Rafa. You never can tell.
Yeah, because we think we tend to see. I mean, you pointed this out to me, and immediately the idea came, because we tend to look at the civilizations and see, oh, they are gone, they are kaput, but
Hmm.
we're here, and whatever helped uh, start and develop
Yeah,
the current civilization,
yeah.
no doubt had roots before. And so there is this knowledge that is passed down even after the end of a
Yes, yes,
civilization.
yeah, yeah.
And in fact, it's
Next,
so great, you know what, that we're also learning stuff that we had forgotten, and that,
yeah.
like, you know, Dead Sea Scrolls and whatever stuff that is beginning to be excavated and found around the world, and
Hmm.
ancient knowledge traditions and wisdom traditions, all that stuff is also coming back. So in a way, we are reviving the previous civilizations.
Rediscovering what we once knew. Next September, I'll be leading a group to Turkey. Um, we were supposed to go this September. As a matter of fact, if things had gone normally, we would have been home by now. But we'll be going next September instead. And one of the places we'll be going, we'll be spending 2 days at Göbekli Tepe. And one of the great theories that is gaining more and more traction about why was Göbekli Tepe built was that um, there's been a lot of people, Graham Hancock, for instance, and Andrew Collins and myself, we've all written about it, that there seems to be more and more evidence of an ice age civilization that was very advanced and was destroyed at the end of the last ice age in that terrible uh, cosmic uh, episode that happened on Earth, probably a comet called the Younger Dryas Comet. We don't get into all that now, but this civilization was destroyed, but in various places in the world, the survivors passed on to the hunter-gatherers who also survived the Great Cataclysm, passed on their wisdom. And Göbekli Tepe was just such an example. These hunter-gatherers who were on the plains of Anatolia, if we are to believe what some archaeologists want us to believe, they just all of a sudden woke up one morning and having been on a subsistence level and having been primitive and hardly able to survive from day to day, one morning they just woke up and they just said, let's raise some megaton boulders and put them up and build this great temple. Well, probably not. They were probably taught. In other words, they were taught by the civilization that came before. But here's the key. In Anatolia, in Turkey, that was the beginning of our civilization that led eventually to other pockets, for instance, down in Mesopotamia, Sumeria, over in Egypt, in Central America, in South America, different civilizations. So in other words, we can very say that our civilization is very probably built upon a remnant civilization that passed on the best to us and gave us the idea of religion, that gave us the idea of spirituality. Now, maybe we've, of course, in the last 11,500 years, maybe we've gone astray in a lot of different ways. But if we inherited what that previous civilization gave us, then I think your theory is absolutely right. We are taught, we are the recipients of something that was very beautiful and very, very strong. And that gives me hope. That gives me hope indeed.
I think, I imagine like this graph of the evolution, perhaps of human civilization as a whole, you know, throughout history, of something going upwards, but of course there's ups and downs and
Oh,
there's
yeah.
points of
Yeah.
destruction. But
Yeah.
then, I mean, of course, it's also hard because we don't really we're still learning how to compare perhaps the different civilizations, because
Yep.
we have, as we were speaking, the internet and certain machines, and we are very proud in our civilization of all these accomplishments, but we still look at stuff like the pyramids and think, how did
How
they
did they
build
do
it?
it?
We
Yeah.
assume that they were copper tools and stuff like that, but we wouldn't be able to build them
No.
in that way. So we are like,
No.
okay, what are we missing? We are so advanced in a way, because it's true, we are advanced, but we're also missing some elements. And I
Yeah.
think this connects to that idea of the using of consciousness and the using of energy
Hmm.
as a way to affect the world, um, in a way that is different from simple mechanical force.
Yeah. 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 We look at these past civilizations and those who doubt that they existed usually do so on saying, they usually say, well, where's the physical evidence and all this kind of thing? Just ignoring the great megaliths that I like to call the evidence in stone, or ignoring the mythology that I like to call evidence in story. They tend to ignore these things because they're assuming at the beginning that if a great civilization existed, it must look like us. It must have the same use resources in the same way that we do. That they must have used power and perhaps even nuclear energy, but electrical energy or something like that. And where are the wires and all that kind of stuff. What we're doing when we do that is we forget that a civilization can be a great and an advanced civilization that doesn't look anything like us. That the powers they had were totally different. Powers that can be used that don't. You can't dig up these powers with an archaeologist trowel. For
You
instance,
know what?
like what I like to call the psychic toolkit, perhaps, that they had, a different
I
way
was
of moving.
thinking, Russ, just now, uh, the fact that we were able to, for example, excavate and dig up minerals means that they weren't dug up before. So these types of machines that we use now most likely wasn't the exact same thing that they used.
That's a great insight. I think that's a wonderful. That in itself is almost proof that when we look at these Pumupunku, when we look at Göbekli Tepe, when we look at the Egyptian pyramids, and we say, how did they do it? Even Stonehenge, we have a lot of ideas about how, but still it took a tremendous amount of people for a long time, over many hundreds of years, to construct these things. And what kept them motivated? I think there must have been something there. And when you say the fact that we are digging up these fossil fuels now means they weren't dug up before, I think that's a brilliant insight, Rafa. I really do. That in itself is proof that they were concerned with other kinds of ways of doing things that must have worked, because the evidence is right before us in the megaliths. It must have worked. What kind of a technology was it? I don't know. I don't know whether I've told you the story before, but it's just, to me, it's one of the most telling moments that I've ever had. I was visiting the Great Pyramid, and we were over there on the plains outside of Egypt. I mean, outside of Cairo. And we were there on the Giza Plateau. And of course, they don't allow you to go anywhere by yourself there. You have to have a state certified guide with you. And so our little group met up with our guide, and he was going to take us deep into the pyramid. And we were walking down this long corridor, and I have a little claustrophobia, so it's a little tough anyway. And you can't stand up straight. It's not tall enough to stand up straight. You have to bend over, and you're walking on this wooden pathway that they've built. And I look down, and along this wooden pathway are all these electrical wires, and they're there to power the lights so we could see where we were going in the pyramid. Well, I was the first person in line right behind the guide. And I began to say, I wonder how they could see to come down here to work. And so I asked the guide, I said, can I ask you a quick question? The guide said, sure, anything. And I said, well, I'm looking at the roof, the ceiling over our head. I'm looking at the walls. There's no smoke. There's no soot, nothing like that. They didn't do it with torches. And I said, how did they see to get down here and work down here without torches, without some kind of thing? The guide actually turned away from me. And as he turned away from me, he just mumbled, well, they must have had a light source of some kind. And on he walked. And that was his explanation. They must have had a light source. Well, obviously they had a light source. Obviously they had a technology, and obviously we don't know what it was. It was totally different than anything we have. But the fact that they had it, that's very obvious. And it's right out there in front of everybody to see. Those are the kinds of questions that I would like to hear answered by people who are looking into our past. I think, as we said earlier, I agree with you 100%. We have forgotten something that our ancestors knew, and maybe we are just now rediscovering it. I hope so. I really hope so, because the way we're going about it, with the fossil fuels and with the kinds of energies and with the kind of destructive technologies that we're using, that isn't doing planet Earth any good at all.
I think that kind of knowledge that we're missing, it's part of since it's more etheric, perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
or more subtle rather than physical and material. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's more connected to the cycles of time. So it's probably something that that lets itself be discovered in cycles. So when you lose it, you kind of need to wait for the next. So like a wave,
Wait for the next cycle. Yeah.
You need to wait for when it shows itself again, in a way,
Yeah.
or when it shows in consciousness, in the imagination of the
Mm-hmm.
people, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do
Yeah.
you think?
Yeah. I agree with that 100%. The wheel of samsara is it's called by many different names, but it's found in many different mythologies. It goes around and around and around. And when you find yourself at a particular place, you are always faced with a choice. Is it time to step off, or is it time to go around again? But I think it's a very real phenomenon. And perhaps because we are living in an age where quantum physics is still brand new, but 75, 100 years ago, scientists discovered a whole landscape that they never knew existed. And they did it with mathematics, and they did it with their equations. On the other hand, I think that it was not a new landscape. I think it was a landscape that has been known for thousands of years by shamans and by mystics and by gurus. And they found that landscape through intuition and their own spiritual practices. So perhaps because we're living in the day when science, left brain science and right brain mysticism, physics and metaphysics, when they're coming together and forming one highway, perhaps that's a sign to us that we're living in such a day when we are rediscovering, as you said, something that was around earlier. And it may be our salvation. So we'd better listen. We just better really listen.
There's no doubt a reawakening. That's why
Yes.
I call this show the Mystic Times. I think people are becoming more interested or even in putting it in the terms that we're speaking now. I think that wheel is at that mystic turning point in a way.
Yes.
So we are becoming more open to the possibility of something invisible being real.
Yeah. It's an exciting time. The only trouble is that sometimes exciting times can be difficult. So the difficulties that we're facing, they can be seen as difficulties, or they can be seen as the possible points of new beginning and excitement.
I'm following. I started reading this, or not really reading, but nowadays you read with your ears. You listen to books.
Sure.
But
sure.
I've started getting into this thing called the Law of One. I don't know if you've heard about it.
No, I haven't.
There is this concept in it that is service to self and service to others. That's like the two polarities in the universe, according to this information. And so when the wheel is turning and service to others can become aware of these invisible technologies of the mind or mystical technologies, on the flip side, the service to self is going to fight against the sharing of all of that, because service to self wants that for itself. Service to others wants it for all of us. And that is the eternal battle.
Yes. And like waves on a beach, they come and they subside, but they keep coming. They keep coming. Maybe here's hoping we're at a point of high tide when the waves are really coming up high on the beach. That's a great thought. I don't know what happens. I'm sitting here looking at the clock and realize we've been talking for an hour already. It just doesn't. It never seems to affect me. It goes by so quick when I'm talking to you. So I really appreciate it. It's been great being with you again, as always, and look forward to many more of these in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. It's been awesome for me too. And let's write that book, the Inheritors of the Strongest.
The Inheritors and the Best of Us continues on. That's right. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rafa.
Yeah. All right. So please, if you would like to share anything where people can find more about your work or get in contact with you.
Sure. It's easiest way is just go to my website, jimwillis.net, www.jimwillis.net. And there is a contact page there. I'd love to hear from you. And all kinds of wonderful things can happen. And if any more of my old friends who I'd like to get in touch with, who I haven't see this as the couple up in Massachusetts, if any more of my old friends find it, love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jim, for your time, for sharing this free session, jamming session with me. Yeah, we got some interesting points explored. Yeah.
I hope we made some good music together. Thank you so much.
So do I. Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll see you now next time.
Bye.